as I've said many times before, services are almost like the inverse of goods in the sense they don't have the complex supply chain, but what you're buying is really hard to define. It's really hard to measure. It's really hard to compare price. So I think it's a very valid point you make about that kind of manufacturing versus service-led approach. It does play through to the way organizations are structured and what they're measuring. And as we've kind of briefly discussed before, and I'm interested to kind of get your take on it, this leads often to a bit, maybe almost too much of a focus on just the purchase order as the be all and end all of the central point of information that people are using. What's your view on that? What have you seen as the kind of pitfalls and areas of where there are issues in that approach?
So I think a lot of organizations default to managing services to purchase orders because their ERP systems are deeply embedded as core financial infrastructure. These systems are well funded, they're well governed, they're sponsored by the CFO, whereas services, platforms, VMSs are often used as secondary investments, typically sponsored by procurement, and it's harder to justify without clear consolidated data. I think at a leadership level, there's an awareness of professional services spend. It's usually significant and has been getting more significant over the years, but there's often a limited enterprise-wide strategy for managing services holistically. Leaders, again, like I said before, don't know what they don't know. There is generally spend approval controls in the process, sometimes at an enterprise level, sometimes at a business unit level, depending on how large the organization is, but it's tactical. It's project by project, business unit by business unit, rather than through, I would say, an integrated workforce or capability lens. I think that critical and insightful information is deep and deep in contract systems, in contracts, in PDFs, in emails, in people's, saved files, and it makes it very, very difficult to generate the information that is meaningful or insights to demonstrate value. Offboarding, onboarding, access management, compliance, they're all fragmented across security, HR, sourcing, IT, facilities, and there's no single system of record. I think I've seen time and time again, companies lack visibility to their total workforce. Organizations that I've worked for have external workforce that represent between 20 to 50% of their entire workforce. And unfortunately, right, it's insane. And I don't believe these processes can effectively be governed by POs alone. I think a lot of organizations struggle to answer basic questions. Who is working here? How long have they been working here? What supplier are they working for? What contract are they on? What costs? How much are we paying for them? And what access do they have? I think the lack of visibility creates operational, financial, and risk exposure. I think issues such as poor offboarding, or issues that are created are poor offboarding processes, rehiring individuals terminated for cause, uncontrolled system access, untracked contractor costs. They go unnoticed, and they're not seen. Interest in improvement typically rises when there's a risk event, when the volumes have ballooned significantly, or the cost leakage becomes visible. And I really want to underscore the risk portion here, especially these days. There's obviously financial risk, and I'll talk about that in a second. Fraud, fake actors. There's also a lot of countries that are trying to penetrate our data, our information, access controls. I worked in one organization where I was able to demonstrate to the COO, and this is interesting, that the thousands of work reductions they made in FTE was being offset almost entirely by the growth of external workforce, and they had no idea. So effectively, they increased the total cost. I mean, the goal was to reduce cost despite the headcount cost, because professional services, we know, can be 40 to 200% more expensive than FTE. That level of transparency helped me create a business case for headcount tracking only. They still, to this day, for whatever reason, have not put in a services tool. And so they're managing it through, different avenues, Excel spreadsheets, so on and so forth, but they still haven't put into place. Another organization I work for actually did put it into place. I was able to showcase the risk. And now, this was over 10 years ago, now they're actually able to have meaningful conversations on their workforce. In this particular case, obviously there was the transparency issue. I think when we told the CEO that his external workforce was 33% of the entire workforce, he fell off his chair. The other thing we were able to showcase is that contractors were not being effectively offboarded. When you have a PO, there's an incentive for the manager to onboard a resource because they need the person to work, but they don't know or forget or don't have time to offboard that contractor. So thousands of contractors are not being offboarded, and this is an issue with all organizations or many organizations, and it's a risk. HR, I think, sourcing have different. They operate in silos, and I think they have different priorities, which I think has been difficult to build a unified enterprise workforce strategy. But I think without this mindset, organizations default to using POs as a transactional tool rather than, I think, managing services as a strategic capability, which it is, because it is probably the largest line item. Employees, professional services, they're pretty significant. I think ultimately focusing on POs provides financial control, but not operational, workforce, or risk visibility. And without integrated systems and cross-functional alignment, organizations are not going to be able to manage at scale and complex, and they're not able to manage at the scale and complexity required. And I think if companies do that, they will likely be more competitive in the market.